Divisions run deep over a dam on the Nile. Egypt and Ethiopia can't agree on when or how to fill this reservoir. Could a spat over water lead to war? I'm Ali Aslan, and today's newsmaker is the Nile Dam Dispute. When it's finished, the Grand Renaissance Dam will have cost almost $5 billion to build. And to Ethiopia, it will have been money well spent. By tapping the Nile at its source, the government believes it's going to revive the economy and pull millions from poverty. So, what's the catch? Well, the countries downstream, Sudan and Egypt, both are very concerned. Cairo fears if Ethiopia fills the dam too quickly, Egypt will be left without enough water. For years, they've held tense talks, and the latest round again ended with no progress. So, Ethiopia now says it's going to start filling the dam next month. Deal or no deal? Natalie Pahonen reports.
The Nile's waters have sustained communities for millennia. Its life-giving powers are set to be harnessed once more as part of Africa's largest hydroelectric plant. After almost a decade of construction, the finish line is coming into sight for this nearly $5 billion project. The Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam is set to transform millions of lives. About 70% of Ethiopians live without electricity, but the lights could be switched on when the dam is complete. Yet determining who has the right to control these waters is causing political friction. Ethiopia is the source of the Blue Nile. It heads through Sudan, where it merges with the White Nile and then flows through Egypt. Cairo is worried that the dam will affect the volume of water that reaches them. The reservoir behind the dam will be able to hold 74 billion cubic meters of water. It will literally take several years to fill. And that's the main point of contention between Egypt and Ethiopia. The government in Cairo is worried that if the reservoir is filled too quickly, then it will reduce Egypt's water supply, which makes this an existential issue. About 90% of its fresh water comes from the Nile. Slowing down the water flow could irrevocably change life here. A 1959 treaty allocated water between Egypt and Sudan, the lion's share going to Cairo. Ethiopia wasn't included in the deal. There have been a series of talks in recent years between the three countries, but they haven't found a legally binding deal they can all agree on. Egypt says it wants a diplomatic solution. The government has now asked the UN to step in and mediate. The Sudanese government has warned against any escalation and wants talks upgraded to a prime ministerial level. With the wet season imminent, Ethiopia is ready to start filling the reservoir.
As for the water filling, our current plan is to fill it with water during the rainy season.
Successive Ethiopian governments have promoted the dam as a linchpin for economic development. The dam will be able to generate 6,000 megawatts of energy. That's enough to provide power to the entire nation and still have excess supply to sell abroad. Determining what makes an equitable share of this natural resource has become a highly politicized process. The ultimate outcome will have a lifelong impact on the people who depend on it. Natalie Pahonen, The Newsmakers.
And joining me now from Addis Ababa is Gedion Asfaw. He's the manager of the Grand Renaissance Dam project and a member of Ethiopia's negotiation team. In Uppsala, Sweden is Ashok Swain. He's the UNESCO chair of International Water Cooperation. And in London is Egyptian affairs analyst Mostafa Ragab. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. Gedion, as we heard, we found out about the importance of this dam to your country, but we also heard about the misgivings of your neighbors, Egypt and Sudan in particular. Now, your country is saying you are going to go ahead with filling the dam no matter what, with or without an agreement. Is that true?
Well, that is true, but that needs some clarification. And, when we are saying we'll fill the dam, it's not filling the dam up to its full supply level. The first year, it's only taking 4.9 billion cubic meters. That's a mere less than 10% of the annual flow of the Nile. So it's being filled stage by stage. It has 6 stages. It will take 4 to 7 years to fill the dam until its optimum operating level. But what we're saying is the first year, starting this July, we will only retain 4.9 billion cubic meters. So this will have no impact to downstream reservoirs or into HUD also.
But your neighbors beg to differ. I mean, they are concerned, aren't they not? Isn't that something you should be taken into consideration?
We are concerned also. We have been together for the last 9 years and designing the filling and operation of the dam and discussing all through these years. And the 3 countries have already agreed on the 4 to 7 years filling period of the dam. And the first stage filling has 2 phases, with 4.9 the first year and 13.5 additional retention the second year. And that the first year, 4.9, will be testing the 2 turbines. And the second year, additional turbines will be tested, and it will reach 595 meters above sea level only after the second year.
Well, let's bring in Mostafa here at this point, because Mostafa Ragab, obviously the Egyptian side is not convinced about what the Ethiopian side is saying. Quite on the contrary, your country almost entirely depends on the Nile for its fresh water supplies and sees the dam as a potentially existential threat. Egypt is very much concerned that it will reduce the country's water supply. Are you content with what you're hearing from Gedion?
I was rather disturbed with the first statement. He said that they're going to fill the dam regardless. But he followed that by saying good things. Obviously, when you are in front of a conflict like this, you need to come with a fair deal for everybody, a fair deal that will not harm anybody. So if we put ourselves in the position of Ethiopia, and Ethiopia put themselves in the position of the Egyptian people to feel for each other, the Nile is the life for Egypt. Egypt without the Nile is finished. Egypt will suffer hell if this issue have carried on without reaching a fair agreement. The dispute here is about the quantity of water that will be released. The second issue is about the time it will take to fill the dam. And I think we should be able to sit down and reach a deal to satisfy everybody, a deal that be fair to everybody, to resolve these 2 issues. But what we hear always from Ethiopia, with all respect for the Ethiopian people, with all our good wishes for Ethiopia to prosper and have a good future and good economy, it's all the best for them. But the best got to be for everybody, not just for one country. It's not just Egypt. There is a lot of other countries involved in this project. But Egypt and Sudan are mainly the one affected with this.
We need more talks. We need more talks, says Mostafa Ragab. But of course, talks have already been held and have not produced the result that Egypt, at least, and Sudan wanted, Ashok Swain. Now, the Nile is obviously something that you have worked on for a number of years. You're a preeminent expert on the subject matter. How do you think we're going to get this issue resolved?
I think it is very expected that the conflict has come up. Who has really looked at this Nile River dispute for time, he understands that this is not an easy issue because it has become highly politicized. It is more than the water, there is something else. So I think it was expected this conflict to arise when Ethiopia built this dam. But the question is the kind of negotiation or the kind of ways we realize that probably certainly a negotiation or a negotiated settlement will arrive. That was too soon to expect that kind of settlement. It will come. But I think the thing is that now both the three countries in the basin, particularly Ethiopia and Egypt, they should realize that when this dam has been built and the dam will operate, and so how to get the best possible solution out of it. And I think not to make too securitized the issue, not to make too much of this noise about whether giving this kind of threat. I think it's finally they should sit down and talk more. I mean, this kind of water negotiation takes much longer, and this dam is not really filling up overnight. This is only starting the process. So I think they should really start talking more, and they have already talked, but talk more and try to find a negotiated settlement, because otherwise a conflict will be much more problematic for the region and for the dam and for the river itself.
But of course, time here is of essence because Ethiopia will begin filling the dam in July. It has already said so. It wants to capitalize on the upcoming rainy season. Egypt, on the other hand, Gedion has already said it has to respond, even forcefully, if it must be, if Ethiopia takes unilateral action here. Are you concerned that the stance on the part of the Ethiopians can lead to an escalation in the region?
There is a possibility that escalation, the kind of words or the kind of language being used, it's a very difficult languages are being used by the sides. They should be very careful. And I think, but at the same time, I expect that they will not really lead to much more conflictual than what it is. It will, of course, deteriorating the relationship, but it's leading to a certain kind of violence or violent conflicts is very doubtful. There are various reasons behind this.
Gedion,
because I think you don't really...
Gedion, I want you to jump in here because I initially posed a question to you about your concerns about escalations in the region. Egypt has already said that it will not stand by while Ethiopia takes unilateral action.
There is no unilateral action. We've been discussing and negotiating up to even a week ago. We're sitting together in the shadow of COVID-19, virtually discussing on the filling and operation of the gap. And as my friend said, this dam is not going to be filled overnight. We're just saying that we'll retain 4.9 billion, 10% of the annual flow the first year. And we'll have 2 years to discuss and subsequent filling and operation of the dam. So what logic is that to talk about conflict when there isn't anything to really go violent about this? Is this not the world?
Mustafa, is your country overreacting?
Negotiated
is
and
Egypt overreacting here?
Have been negotiated by a number of countries.
I would say that Egypt,
I think Egypt
have shown
is over.
content. Egypt have shown control. I think Egypt have done everything they can do. We can see that Egypt goes to any conference or any negotiation they've been invited to. And when the negotiations failed, Egypt is knocking at all the doors. Lately, they are at the United Nations. Now, Egypt is always looking for a solution. And I just like to say all this issue is based on the rainwater. I just pray to God that God will resolve this issue and this water will not come as much as people wish to cause this problem. But what really is bothering me is that I'm 100% sure we have no problem with Ethiopia or the Ethiopian people. I'm sure that there is other politicians, other people in the background causing problems for Egypt through our friends in Ethiopia. This is what's happening. Egypt has been facing a lot of problems from all the directions, south, north, east, and every day there is a new problem coming for the Egyptian government to deal with. But this is the most serious issue. This is a life-threatening issue. But Egypt is knocking at all the doors. They're not overreacting. They are not following any calls for anything that is being heard on social media or the media. Egypt is not doing that. But Egypt will do its best to reach a fair solution for the Egyptian people, for the Ethiopian people. That's what we're doing all the time.
Ashok Swain, of course, you have pleaded for more talks, for more negotiations to take place. US-led talks have broken down, have not produced the result that the countries wanted. Now, now Egypt has appealed to the United Security Council. Is that a path that you think will have a real shot to getting this issue resolved?
I think going to the U.S. negotiation, because it really was not exactly done as a negotiation, it was almost forcing a kind of an agreement. So I think that didn't work. They didn't have the patience. You need a certain kind of a negotiator who has the patience and this office, and also to know. I mean, of course, you will have a bias. Negotiation will have a bias, but at least when you are doing it with the certain kind of agreement from both the parties. But going to the UN Security Council, I do see very limited hope getting some kind of benefit, considering the way UN Security Council is now and the global politics is going on. And the UN Security Council will have a very limited role. It can only advise, it can suggest, it is not going to really play a negotiating role. So I think the real issue will be for both the parties and Sudan. Sudan, I mean, I think we should not really leave Sudan out. Sudan is an extremely important party in this, and Sudan's role is extremely key in actually dealing with this kind of negotiation. So I think that these three parties need to go and find a certain kind of negotiation. If not, I think they are not able to do it among themselves. They need to find outside a certain negotiator who can able to bring out a deal from that. Otherwise, there are possibilities they can approach the International Court of Justice or finding a kind of, because there are two different disputes going on. I mean, they have agreed, both. I mean, all these three countries have agreed principles how to fill the dam, but there are disagreement over the long period of drought, and also how the dispute resolution will take place if there is a problem. And I think these are some of the key issues left, but that needs us much more talking, much more trust building, much more good negotiation skills, and also to take this process to a level that where they can really build the trust and talk to each other and find a negotiated settlement. So I don't really see the UN Security Council doing much, but I think, to find someone else who can really negotiate it better.
Gideon, what would a
I agree with you, but what they will say will be taken into account. Yes, they cannot force anybody to do anything, but their opinion there will be taken into account as a fair deal. Egypt is only looking for a fair deal. What is the difference if we fill the dam in 7 years or in 16 years? What is the rush? If this is going to harm Egypt, should we go for it? I think the Egyptian negotiators have been very patient. They've always been listening to a lot of words that they shouldn't be listening to, but they've been very patient, going to everywhere they've been asked to go. When this negotiation failed, they go to the next one. Everyone invite them to a negotiation, they go. So we're doing all what we can do to reach a solution. This is all what we want. And I believe very much that there is an influence, outside influence on Ethiopia in creating this problem, because there is nobody else who will benefit from it. Egypt will not benefit, Ethiopia will not benefit, Sudan will not benefit. Don't forget the other countries that benefit from the River Nile. But Sudan and Egypt are mainly going to be affected badly. So Ethiopia, as a good neighborhood, neighbor relationship, should be looking for a good relation with their African countries that surrounding them.
Ashok, if you were being asked to devise up and come up with a plan to solve this sticky issue between the three countries, Ethiopia, Egypt, and Sudan, what would your blueprint be?
I think it's a very difficult question to answer. But the question is the way it looks now, the way things are. It's a very small amount of differences exist, to be honest. But it's becoming very big because there's a lot of political capital has been made out of it because by the different parties. So if it is really to be taken into this account that how much really water is in the case of a long period of drought, then of course you need to have that kind of a system which will be agreed by both the parties. You can't really force or impose on something. But there is also another issue of also how much really, because it's a sharing the water. Because as you know, this dam is only a hydropower dam. It's not really taking away the water from the system. But there is a fear by the countries in the downstream countries, particularly Egypt, that there is a, the possibility of water sharing might come in. And I think this is where the really another key factor exists. So I think it's a somehow to build a trust, to create certain kind of environment where all the three parties, particularly Ethiopia and Egypt, will have the possibility to trust them and get a negotiation, because this is some things which you cannot do in the immediate effect that everything will be put in place. So it should be an active engagement, active agreement, active treaty, which will be, because we don't really know about the future. The climate change is really creating a lots of challenges. So we need to have a dynamic agreement, which we have been advocating for all the water agreements in all over the world. So that agreement has to be dynamic enough to address the issues which the basin, and particularly the the Blue Nile basin, is going to face.
Gideon, you've already reiterated, the willingness on the part of your government to come up with an amicable solution for the dam. What concessions are you willing to make? Time obviously is of essence here. The Egyptian government is quite nervous and is threatening with repercussions. What concessions are you willing to make at this particular point?
We have made already a lot of concessions. We've agreed to take care of their concern regarding drought and prolonged drought. The crux of the matter is not the filling and operation of the GERD. The two countries have agreed for the full utilization of the Nile in their 1959 agreement, which we are not party to. That is the crux of the matter. And, contributing 86% of the Nile water, 77 billion per year, and denying Ethiopia and giving Ethiopia a zero share, including the 9 upstream countries, giving a zero share, that's ultimately the 11 countries have to sit down and discuss water sharing agreement. But this dam is not about water sharing. It's about the creation of a dam, which we agreed, considered to do while we can fill it within 2 to 3 years. We've extended the filling period from 4 to 7 years.
But would you concede that the concerns on the part of Egypt and the Sudan are justified? Would you concede that?
Not all of it. Not all of it. Because they are using this agreement. They want to tie the hands of Ethiopia not to operate the dam freely and engage us in a water sharing agreement through these negotiations. And we are telling them time again and again that this is about operating and filling the dam, not about water sharing. Because when the time comes to negotiate water sharing, it will be the 11 countries to sit down and discuss about water sharing agreement.
But if I understand you correctly, Gideon, because we are running out of time, if I do understand you correctly, Ethiopia will go ahead with or without an agreement starting to fill the dam next month in July. Is that correct?
That shouldn't be right. That shouldn't be right. Shouldn't be right.
Gideon, let's give Gideon a chance to respond.
Already agreed during the two.
Gideon, it's a simple yes or no question. Are you going to go ahead?
Yes, they have agreed. Yes, along with the construction of the dam. So we will go ahead and fill the dam.
All right, Mostafa.
We have already agreed.
Mustafa, Ethiopia will go ahead, as has been stated by the government and Gedion on this particular show. Are you concerned about the next moves, about escalation on the part of your government?
In negotiations, ABC negotiations, you give and take. Egypt used to get 5.5 billion, and you're only going to have 4 billion, and they agreed to that. Obviously, if the attitude is there that we're going to do it regardless, this is like going head to head. There is no negotiation there. It's like, I'm going to do it. You like it or not, I'm going to do it. So where is the negotiation? Where is the give and take in negotiation? Obviously, I'll be very, very concerned, because if anyone faces a life-threatening issue, then they have to take all the consequences to protect their lives.
Ashok, how concerned and how optimistic are you? We're running out of time, but just a quick assessment. How optimistic are you that this is going to get resolved before things escalate?
I think if Ethiopia tries to fill the dam next month, it will not be end of the world, because it's very, as it's been mentioned before, it's only initial period of filling the dam. It's not much. But the question is, I hope they will not do it, because they don't want to lose the goodwill of whatever they do have on this issue. And I would expect them to really see that the international opinion and engage in further negotiations. And I think when they have put this much of huge resources on building this dam, the dam should start with as a basis of cooperation among these three.
Well, unfortunately, we have to leave it at there. Gedion Asfaw, Ashok Swain, Mostafa Ragab, thank you so much for your insights, and we will, of course, continue to monitor and observe the situation. Thank you, of course, out there for watching as well. This wraps up a new edition of Newsmakers, and we're very much looking forward to see you again next time.